there, fellow Patriots. Welcome back to another episode of Patriots of the American Republic. We've got another one here. This might be a little bit long, so I may have to break it up into two parts, so bear with me. As we highlighted in our previous video, the Democrats have cemented themselves to be the actual threats to democracy. No bigger example can be given than the fact that Joe Biden said he would stay in the race. He was pushed out by the leftist, the elitists of the Democratic Party, and Kamala Harris was placed as the runner-up. They didn't have any debates against Joe Biden, leaving the people unable to truly pick from different candidates. Likewise, the basic voter has no other option than to go with who these people have selected for them. That doesn't seem very democratic to me. Now, it was just a few weeks back after Biden's disastrous debate against Trump, the Democrats were panicking about what to do. Should they keep going with Joe Biden or should they replace him? And if they do replace him, like with who? Who would they replace him with? They seemed like they had nobody. They didn't have anybody to support, take up the challenge. It definitely wasn't Kamala Harris. Her polls were horrible by Democratic measures. Let's take a look at this first video just as a refresher.
In the Economist YouGov poll, same poll, Joe Biden was sitting at 39%. She's at 37%. So if you're looking to the vice president, you have to ask yourself, does that actually put you, if you're a Democrat, in a better position politically? And then the question would become, if you say it doesn't, would Kamala Harris also agree to step aside and let a brand new ticket come in? Or is that something she would fight? Would you have complications there?
Harry, do we have polling yet that suggests that voters want a different candidate?
Yeah, this is the whole question, right? If it's not President Biden, then who could it be on the Democratic side? And the truth is, there are no easy answers. I went back and looked at the polling versus Donald Trump for a bunch of different Democrats have been suggested. Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. Look at this. They all trail Donald Trump. So the idea here that we're somehow going to get this magic bullet, that there's somehow going to be some Democrat who can beat Donald Trump easily, I just don't see it in the numbers. At this particular point, if Joe Biden takes on Donald Trump, he's trailing. If there's another Democrat who runs against Donald Trump, they too are trailing. Perhaps you want to make the argument you bring in another Democrat who isn't as well known as Joe Biden, who has universal name recognition, and maybe they could change the numbers. But the fact is, any Democrat who entered the race right now, at least among those that are being suggested by a bunch of folks, they would all enter the race at this particular point as an underdog to former President Donald Trump.
So as you can see there, she wasn't polling good. If we remember, Kamala Harris was one of the first candidates that dropped out in the 2020 election because the large majority of Democrats didn't like her. So fast forward to Biden picking her as his running mate because he promised his constituents that he would be picking a woman first and then a woman of color. Suddenly, during that time, I remember seeing hashtags from the left, so proud. He's so proud, but you didn't want her as your president. It just didn't make sense. But let's fast forward to Biden's actual time in office. And based on left-wing polling, her popularity sank even lower than imaginable.
There are reports that say that you have the lowest approval rating of any vice president. Well, there are polls that also say I have great approval ratings.
Swing voters don't like Harris. How big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
She's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision.
They don't like her. There's lots of reasons they don't like her.
Kamala Harris's approval rating is now at 28%, which is an historic low for any modern vice president.
We're hearing it from mainstream media, one outlet after another, one leak after another. The Kamala Harris is the worst vice president ever, the worst politician ever.
We don't see the vice president. What people are saying to me, and I'm sure they're saying it to you, where's the vice president? Some White House officials are feeling that she came off looking unprepared for inevitable questions about when she might visit the southern border.
So as you can see there, we've got enough evidence to demonstrate that she wasn't polling good in the past. She wasn't polling good up until recently. And then all of a sudden, now she's beating Donald Trump in the polls. So, it's just remarkable the amount of gaslighting that's going on here, right? There's ample evidence to confirm that most Democrats were not supportive of Harris since back in the 2020 race. But of course, there's, like I said, there's just one thing that you can count on is Democrats lying and spewing propaganda. Let's check this one out.
And I'll just say this, and I'm with Tim. I'm jumping out my seat higher than you, my brother. I'm just going to say that.
There was a twinkle in her eye. There was a kick in her step that, when you're vice president, you're not loose. You can't, there's somebody above you. There's somebody, you don't want to overshadow them. And this was quite the coming out. And I got chills when she said, Donald Trump, I know your type.
Kamala Harris is giving people the chills. They're falling in love with her, a twinkle in her eye. We're jumping out of our seats. We're just so excited. It's the most fake, most phony, totally manufactured little honeymoon media period. Fake news honeymoon period, I should say. They're trying so hard to frickin' sell this.
The media has been working overtime to make her look likable, to make her look competent, to make her look like a superwoman, to be quite frank. They went from not liking her to turning her into female Jesus pretty much overnight, to be quite frank. The media has received, its marching orders, and now they have to not only paint her in a positive spin, but now they also have to cover up her failures, right? During the first year of Biden's administration, the southern border was rushed by illegal immigrants. No surprise there, based on what Biden had said during the campaign, right? And these are illegal immigrants from across the world, right? It's not just the Central and South American countries, right? We've got illegals from the Middle East, from China, from India, from, just about everywhere. Initially, the administration claimed that there was no crisis at the border, despite videos from the media, first-hand accounts from multiple border agents. Kamala Harris told the American people that the border was secure.
Well, she didn't do nothing. She helped allow the invasion to happen and gaslit the American people, telling them everything was just fine.
Would you call the border secure?
The border is secure.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever.
That's in 1 year, by the way. 2 million in 1 year.
I'm confident this border is secure.
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
The border is anything but secure, as reports indicate around 10 million illegal immigrants and counting have entered this country. This after Joe Biden assigned her to handle the issue at the border, effectively referring her as the border czar. Since the border remains open and an issue even amongst Democrats, the media has to cover up her failure by saying, look, she was never really the border czar to begin with.
And since our country has been invaded by an army of over 8 million illegal aliens under the Biden-Harris administration, despite Kamala being supposedly in charge of the border czar, pretending that she was going to stop that problem, now the media is claiming that she never had anything to do with the border at all. This from Time Magazine. Camel Face Harris was never Biden's border czar. Here's what she really did. Well, obviously, we know that she did nothing. And while the liberal media is pretending that she had nothing to do with the border crisis whatsoever, thanks to the power of the internet, we have a clip of old Joe admitting that she was at one time tasked with pretending to stop the problem.
I've asked her, the VP today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle and the countries that help us. We're going to need help in stemming the movement of so many folks, stemming the migration to our southern border.
Folks, it's just some folks coming across the border, not an invading army, not 8 million criminal invaders who have no business being here, let alone staying here, let alone sucking off of the government teat in our tax dollars. This from Axios, one of these online wastes of cyberspace. The Trump campaign and Republicans have tagged Harris repeatedly with the border czar title, which she never actually had. That's interesting because here is an article from Axios a few years ago after she was appointed by Joe Biden as the border czar.
Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
People gonna have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
Yeah, Kamala Harris was never actually the border czar. That's fake news, Republicans. I mean, really? Democrats are really going to try to pull this one? Kamala Harris was never the border czar? Then please explain this.
And the Biden administration did task Vice President Kamala Harris with the issue of migrant crossings, naming her the so-called border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some back.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
Yep, you guessed it. Democrats being as dishonest as you'd expect them to be. They're playing a ridiculous game of semantics. Joe Biden never literally named Kamala Harris the border czar.
The media's ability to bold-faced lie to their audience, knowing there is video record of them calling her the border czar and now denying it, is yet another example why they are so mistrusted. It's examples like this that earns them the title of fake news. If you're paying attention, up until last year, Kamala was saying that the border was secure, as we just watched, right? It's undeniable the border is not secure, which is why the media has to now play cover-up game for her. And we know the border isn't secure because she just claimed it in an Atlanta rally that she will essentially fix the border problem. Watch this. So essentially, there's no border problem. The border's secure. We went from there's no crisis to the border's secure to now she's not the border czar, and now she's going to fix the border.
Trump directed his allies in the Senate to vote it down. Right. He tanked the bipartisan deal because he thought it would help him win an election. Which goes to show Donald Trump does not care about border security. He only cares about himself. And when I am president, I will work to actually solve the problem.
She's going to solve the problem, to which there is no problem because the border's secure. You guys following that? Okay, maybe you guys are following it better than I am. The border has been the biggest and most recognizable thing Kamala Harris was appointed to do, and she has been unable to do it. In fact, she has been unable to do pretty much anything. In the last 3 years, what has she been able to accomplish? People can't say it because they don't know, because she hasn't done anything.
Attorney General in California, and she was the senator from California. I really don't know much of what she did.
I'm not sure I know enough about her accomplishments to answer that question.
The way that she carries herself.
She was Attorney General in her state. She moved up to becoming, the Vice President of the United States. So she has definitely made her stamp in history of being the first African American female Vice President, and soon to be first Vice President as a woman of color.
What do you think has been her biggest accomplishment since she's been vice president?
Oh, I have to say, since the Dobbs opinion, the way that she has rallied women and friends of women, also called men, around this country on the issue of abortion and just taken it home. First vice president in history to visit an abortion clinic.
Okay. This country wants substance and solutions, not sugary identity politics.
There's nothing tangible there as far as her accomplishments go. Unfortunately, She hasn't accomplished anything substantial during her time in the White House. So what? She's a woman. So what? She's a woman of color. Oh my gosh, that's not something that you work hard at. That's something that you're born. It's something innate. You're born that way, you know. And I'm sorry, these aren't the 1800s where, you know, you've got some huge ladder to climb. You know, I don't know what world the left lives in, but it's not a world of reality. Now, you know, so here's the interesting part. She's campaigning on how she's going to fix all of the issues that her administration helped to create, like the border. Again, the border is the problem that her administration or their administration created. Now she's telling you that she's going to go ahead and solve it. Why aren't you solving it now? Why do we have to? So she just said in the video that Donald Trump only cares about himself. Do you realize that she's telling the American people, vote for me and I'll fix the issue? She's in a position of power. She's the vice president. She has leverage. She can talk into the president's ear, and tell him, hey, look, obviously these things aren't working. I've got some ideas. How about we put them in play and see how that works out for the American people? That way we're actually helping. That's not what's going on here. It's vote for me and I'll do. Versus, and I could understand if she wasn't in a position of power, because yes, if you're not in a position of power, that makes sense, but she's in a position of power. She should be doing that stuff now. Thankfully, many folks, though, aren't buying into the lies, but naturally, if you don't buy, you know, we know what happens if you don't buy into it, right? The Democratic Party will take out an old spot from their playbook, and they'll start to call you, you know, racist and misogynistic, because obviously she's a woman and she's a woman of color. So if you're against her for any reason whatsoever, you're one of the two.
So it's going to be very important that I think we brace ourselves for some of the unfair, misogynistic, and racial undertones, overtones, explicit attacks, and implicit attacks that she may be subject to.
Insulting black women, you're going to see something you haven't seen before. Black men are not going to put up with that. I was on a phone call with 20,000 black men. The word protect came up about 1,000 times. Protect this sister. Protect this sister. We're going to protect her. Protect her. You're about to see something you haven't seen before. Look, people messed around with Hillary Clinton and said a bunch of mean stuff to her. Black men set that out. We won't set this out.
They want to call her a DEI president or DEI candidate. So these are just racist dog whistles. Whenever you hear DEI, I want you to think about the N-word. I want you to think about racial slurs. That's what they actually mean.
There is a way to attack her record on policy without calling her a name. Incompetent is an unflattering name. And when people do that to black women, that is what Van is talking about. You might not agree, but as a black woman, let me tell you how we hear.
So, you know, if you criticize Kamala Harris, then you're racist or you're misogynist. It's unbelievable how the left doesn't see how racist they actually are. Like, if I were walking down the street and I saw a woman getting mugged or something like that, I don't care if she's black or white. I don't care if she's Hispanic or Indian or Asian. I'm going to help. Notice how Van Jones says, well, Hillary Clinton, they said some mean stuff about her, so we're going to sit it out because she's white. But because Kamala Harris is a person of color, then now we got to defend her. That's all right. Do they defend Candace Owens when Candace Owens gets attacked by the left? No, of course not, because their racial lens is also biased, right? It only pertains to certain people that fit within the political spectrum that they have. But anyhow, I mean, seriously, how long are the Democrats going to continue to play this charade? I mean, how does Kamala Harris, being black or a person of color or a woman, help me pay my bills? And that is the question that a lot of people are actually voicing.
Or, let me ask you a question. Would you vote for?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm going to just be real honest with this. She's a black woman.
Yeah.
Because they skin folk, not Kim folk.
I think it goes back to what somebody was saying, where it's not voting for someone, but majority will vote for somebody else just
Hold on. Let me line this out.
I think majority.
Is it only because she a black woman?
Yeah.
Do you not see how that's a bad idea?
Elaborate.
Okay, so We're in 3 proxy wars with some of the most powerful leaders in the world. She failed at the border, in which we have an estimation of 15 to 20 million people illegally into this country. That is literally overtaking and bankrupting Chicago to the tune of over $400 million per year, and they are in a deficit. Oakland is going out of business. San Francisco, ditto. California, $65 billion deficit. New York, they're literally cutting trash, in which they are the rattiest, dirtiest city, and they've taken up resources as far as free healthcare, free hotels to the tune of $600 a day. They're literally taking over your schools. Your taxpayer dollars are going to fund the migrant crisis. She was supposed to be in charge of this. We have a failing economy. Every single day I see people getting on the internet talking about $30 an hour is the new minimum wage because inflation is out of control. At one point, it was at almost 10%, depending on what city that you were. She has no policy, no record to stand on. One of the biggest things that she did in her career was lock up more black men than ever before. But we sitting here and vote her in office on identity politics. The very person that she was under as far as the president of the United States of America, she called him racist during a debate, which shows you how fake she is. And the only thing that we can stand on from a policy perspective is whether or not she's black and she's a woman. We did that during the Obama administration, and he didn't do anything for black people. As a matter of fact, y'all complain because the only person that he did, or the only group of people that he really stood for is the alphabet community, and that's his landmark thing that he's still standing on today. So the only thing that we have to stand on is identity politics. That didn't work with Tiffany Henyard in Dayton, Illinois. It didn't work with Karen Bass. It didn't work with Lori Lightfoot in Chicago. It didn't work with Brandon Johnson that then took over her position in Chicago. It didn't work with Andre Dickens in Atlanta. It didn't work with Eric Adams in New York. It doesn't work across the country. Every single Democratic city is a hellhole. And we sitting here talking about identity politics?
That dude laid it out. What a truth bomb, right? So, similar to Joe Biden's famous line during an interview with the Breakfast Club host, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, right? Democrats continue to play identity politics and appeal to the most shallow and insignificant aspects of politics. During a campaign event in Atlanta, Georgia, Harris brought out a female rap artist named Megan Thee Stallion to twerk at her event, similar to when Joe Biden played Despacito for a Latin community in Orlando back in 2020. Harris proves their shallowness and the left's banking people aren't smart enough to understand that they're being pandered to. Thankfully, though, there are people that are noticing it and they're speaking out. They're using their social media platforms to show their disgust and how they're not falling for it again.
I keep seeing the Megan Thee Stallion TikToks from that concert, and I am still scratching my head. Are we living in the Twilight Zone or what? Having Megan Thee Stallion twerk is not going to fix our economy, and it's not going to stop illegal immigrants from flooding this country. But now Kamala is promising to fix the border that she has never even visited. She's in the White House right now. So if she wanted to do something about the border, she could. She's in a position to do so. I don't know if y'all are taking suggestions, but I have one. Why don't y'all go down to the border, put a concert on down there, maybe then you can raise enough money to finish rebuilding the wall. This is literally the worst border crisis in American history. Last thing I want to say is this. Please do not allow yourself to be influenced by gender, skin color, party, or ideology. Pick the candidate that you believe will move you forward and put your country back on track. Because from my vantage point, it is a complete and utter shit show.
So many truth bombs being laid out by just everyday people. I mean, it's just great to see folks talking about this stuff and hitting, those points. To her point, how's this gonna help me pay for my bills? This bringing this person on to twerk for me, right? So anyhow. The left has nothing substantive when it comes to policy. They continue to go on about how bad inflation is and how the economy is. I mean, it's almost unanimous that our country was better off in the prior administration than it is with the current administration. And yet these people, some of these people, continue to want to vote for the same thing. It just doesn't make sense. If you're complaining right now that the economy is bad and you're still voting for the people that caused this or that were part of it, there's something wrong with you. There's a huge disconnect. Now, when asked about actual policies and what Kamala plans to do to fix, for example, inflation, here's her response.
Okay, thank you. Hold on to it. Ma'am, the U.S. is experiencing record inflation, the worst in 30 years, way beyond expectations. OPEC didn't increase oil production. Can you tell us a little bit about how you would prevent the new spending in your Build Back Better agenda from exacerbating the problem? And also, what else are you going to do to fix this problem with inflation?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously, very seriously. And we know from the history of this issue in the United States that when you see these prices go up, it has a direct impact on the quality of life for all people in our country. So it's a big issue, and we take it seriously.
So it's pretty interesting. Number one, she talks about how when prices go up, it affects everybody. Yet in that video, and there's a link if you want to see the entire answer, she gives 3 things that the administration has done which only affects a very small pocket of the American population. One was for medication, another one was for childcare, and I can't remember what the third one is. But again, she mentions food prices are high, and so food, it impacts everybody. Then she goes on to say how they've helped these 3 areas, which is so small. It's not the entire area. So, she rambles on for a whole minute, or almost a whole minute, not answering the question, yet she says that she takes it seriously. It's so seriously you can't answer the question. I don't quite understand what the policy is. Now, this video might not be recent. It's certainly circulating recently, but it might not, I think this was done maybe when inflation hit its peak. I can't remember if that was last year or the year before, but in the end, she really doesn't, at the end of this video, she talks about how, it's a very classic talking point, and we heard Joe Biden say it back then, but she goes on to say how the Build Back Better is not going to cost taxpayer anything. It's not going to cost taxpayers anything. So that indicates to me this was a couple of years ago, and here we are. We're still facing high prices. So again, Joe used the same talking point back in 2020. So we're now 4 years. How are we doing? How's it looking? This is what we got to do. We got to measure what they said before. They're saying very similar things again, or they've said things similar throughout. Where are we now? Are we any better? No. In another video, we heard how she was going to raise, and that video is more recent, corporate taxes and state taxes so again, she's saying how this isn't going to cost the taxpayer anything, but yet she's talking about raising corporate and state taxes. State taxes affect people where there's state taxes like New Jersey, New York, Florida doesn't have it. But corporate taxes do affect people. It might affect a corporation, but when that corporation has a huge amount, let's just say a variance, where are they going to pull that from? They're either going to raise the prices to the products that they sell, or they're going to get rid of people, or they're not going to hire people where they could have hired had they had gains. So it absolutely does affect, and I hope people can really stop buying into these lies. I don't know what type of a world we live in. Back when I was younger and ill-informed about politics, I remember politicians saying that they would lower taxes. No matter what, whether they did it or not, I'm not talking about whether they followed through, but they would campaign on lowering taxes. I remember in 2016, Andrew Gillum, who was going up against Ron DeSantis here in Florida, said this very same line where he was going to raise corporate taxes so that the rich could pay their fair share, and people cheered. And it just boggled my mind how economically illiterate a lot of people are in our day and age. It's just unbelievable. So although she has no clue from an economic standpoint how to make things better, one thing's for sure, she has made it very clear her position on other matters, which is no different than any other Democratic politician at this point, to be quite frank.
It has to be about a goal of saying everybody should end up in the same place. And since we didn't start in the same place, some folks might need more. Equitable distribution. Giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
We are proud of the fact that equity is one of our guiding principles. Proud of the fact that we understand equality is important, but not everybody starts out on the same base.
So these are some of the ways, but we've got to increase the corporate tax rate. We also have to increase taxes for the top 1%. And that part of that is going to be about repealing that tax bill that they just passed. And also looking at estate taxes are going to have to go up.
What is your position on San Francisco as a sanctuary city?
I support our sanctuary law, and I also recognize that we got to a place that became highly publicized where we strayed from it, and so we needed to get back on track. Pardon the...
An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal, and we have to correct course in this conversation.
And I am proud to co-sponsor it. It is about saying that this is about a right, not about a privilege for a few. And let's be clear, it is not only about what is the right thing to do morally and ethically. It's also smart in terms of the fiscal impact. Taxpayers will benefit. You know, our friends in the private sector, they talk about all the time. If they're asking about, are they being efficient? Are they being effective? They ask that question with 3 letters. What is the ROI? Return on the investment.
And now all of a sudden, the Kamala Harris campaign is telling us that they don't support Medicare for all. Well, which one is it? So many of these issues, we've seen total 180s. Kamala Harris initially supported a ban on fracking.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah, and starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities.
Now apparently she doesn't. She supported not only universal health care, but free health care for illegal migrants as well.
Must be addressed.
The bill also says, quote, every individual who is a resident of the United States is entitled to benefits for health care services under this act. Not every individual who's a citizen, but every individual who's a resident. Mm-hmm. So you support giving universal health care, Medicare for all, to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health. Period.
Now she doesn't. She's been an open border Democrat, but now apparently she's not. She's a staunch border security advocate. She used to support bail reform and soft on crime policies.
I am proposing that we reform America's bail system, the money bail system, and get rid of money bail. Because I know that people are sitting in jail every day in America.
So then if you're for overhauling, where do you stand on defund the police?
Look, right. So here's the thing. Defund the police. The issue behind it is that we need to reimagine how we are creating safety. And when you have many cities that have 1/3 of their entire city budget focused on policing, we know that is not the smart way and the best way or the right way to achieve safety. For too long, the status quo thinking has been you get more safety by putting more cops on the street. Well, that's wrong.
And now all of a sudden, she's had a change of heart. It's so completely ridiculous, and I come back right to the same question. How can anybody support such a dishonest candidate in good faith? All the things that now she supposedly doesn't represent, because they're bad policy or destructive for the nation, are all the things that she's been advocating for her entire political career. And a lot of the crises and issues that you're currently experiencing, well, you're experiencing those issues thanks to her.
Let me ask you, can anyone trust anything from this party and this person given the multitude of lies that we've seen from them?
Kamala was in on it. She covered up Joe's obvious mental decline.
Our president is in good shape, in good health, tireless, vibrant, and I have no doubt about the strength of the work that we have done.
But Kamala knew Joe couldn't do the job, so she did it. Look what she got done. A border invasion, runaway inflation, the American dream dead. They created this mess. Kamala owns this failed record.
Call me crazy, but being black, Asian, white, Hispanic, male, female, etc. bears no impact on my finances, my security, or the well-being of my country. I want to hear what policies you have in mind that will help prosper my country. And sadly, like a typical Democrat, Kamala really doesn't have any.
And speaking of money, if you go to Kamala Harris's new website, KamalaHarris.com, that's the first thing that they're asking for. And if you close that window and then scroll around the website, trying to find what exactly are her policies, what is the Harris agenda, you can't find it because they don't have any policies or campaign promises listed. If you go to DonaldJTrump.com, however, you can see right up at the top is the platform section where they list Agenda 47, the official Republican Party platform for President Trump's 20 core programs to make America great again. The first of which, seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. Number 2, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. Number 3, end inflation and make America affordable again. Number 4, make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far. Number 5, stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. Number 6, large tax cuts for workers and no taxes on tips. And it just goes on and on. A fantastic, simple, yet detailed plan of how to make America great again. These are some fantastic ideas. Keep the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Fight to protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts. Cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. Number 17, keep men out of women's sports. Now this is the plan.
Now, in the past few days, she's mentioned certain efforts, such as cracking down on price gouging, and like we showed in another one of our clips, raising corporate or state taxes, none of which will help with inflation, and even some on CNN know it.
I think you will also see Republicans say that, to Ested's point, this is a continuation of Joe Biden's failed policies, which are not very popular on two significant fronts, immigration and the economic front. The vice president gave a speech which a lot of Democrats and progressives lauded as a great speech in terms of her plans on the economy. But our very own reporting showed that it would increase spending by $1.7 trillion over 8 to 10 years. How can the American people pay for that? The Washington Post editorial board called it gimmicks. And so I think Republicans still have an opportunity to continue to contrast, although it's going to be more difficult. But on the issues of policies, I think the Republican Party and conservatives, generally speaking, still have the advantage.
Here are my final thoughts. The Harris Waltz ticket is saturated with identity politics, of which do not benefit the American people in any way, shape, or form. If we are employers seeking employees, we usually look at their resume to see their experience and accomplishments. Harris has nothing substantial to show that she's qualified to be a VP or qualified to be a president and run our country. She has literally nothing to show for it. She lacks so much that she embarrassingly is now taking policies from Trump.
And eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Now, obviously, that campaign promise was totally plagiarized from the Trump camp.
Because when I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
So in that prior video, she talked about corporate taxes and state taxes, which I've mentioned before. And you know, it's politicians' favor, or the left-leaning politicians, it's their favorite go-to move in recent years. And I've been saying this for many years. We don't need to continue to raise taxes. We need to lower government spending. And in an interview with Trump and Elon Musk, Elon actually presents this idea to Trump, and Trump seems to love it. Check this out.
And probably most importantly, and big credit goes to Elon Musk on this, they spoke about probably one of the most important issues that people avoid these days: government inefficiency, waste, and overspending.
I mean, I think it would be great to just have a government efficiency commission that takes a look at these things and just ensures that the taxpayer money, the taxpayers' hard-earned money, is spent in a good way. And I'd be happy to help out on such a commission.
I'd love it
if it were formed.
Well, you're the greatest cutter.
Elon Musk mentions the idea of a government efficiency department, and Trump seems totally receptive. You know, this stuff right here, this is what people are looking for. You know, when people are talking shop, when people are talking politics in their own time with their friends and families in their personal lives, the one topic that always pops up, and you generally tend to see quite miraculous bipartisan consensus, is the issue of government efficiency. Left-wingers, right-wingers, centrists, everybody understands that government is inefficient.
In the end, conservatives back in 2020 warned the left on the things that Biden was saying, that we would be in economic trouble, but the left refused to listen. Here we are again, where they're saying, you know, Kamala Harris is saying very similar talking points, if not worse in some cases, and people are still eating it up. Listen, if you're complaining about the economy and voted for Biden, and you're not changing your vote, please stop complaining, because you're part of what is causing the hardship. You're part of what is causing this decline of our country. I mean, if you're not better off today than you were back then 4 years ago, really, you know, you gotta look, you gotta go beyond the surface, go beyond the fact that she's a person of color, she's a woman, whatever. Those are superficial things that, again, will not help you pay your rent or put food on your table. Guys, we have to do, I mean, you know, and I know most of the people watching